see criticism, unfair criticism, unfounded criticism of various institutions. And I think that should give people pause, and they should stop to reflect on the fact, or should stop to think about, what is the effect of me doing something that I consider just fun or entertaining? What is the effect of that? It's not just about me. It's actually, I have to think about the effect of what I do on wider society. And I'm sorry if it, I don't want to sound like some sort of killjoy, like, oh, you shouldn't have fun on social media. But actually, Russia is on social media. Various Russian actors are on social media all the time. Chinese actors as well, actors from other hostile countries. And it would be, I think, a good thing if we didn't help them more than they deserve to be helped, which is not to be helped at all.
Would you both agree if I said that the cause, at least partial cause for all this you just referred to, would be that we've been drowning in opulence and entertainment since several decades? That's one thing. And second thing that is linked to the issue we just started. If you look all over the world, democratically run states are becoming less and less in numbers. So what do you see, I mean, both of you, the main reasons behind this, I would say at least mid-range, even long trend? Is it the lack of leadership? Is it lack of proper education so that people can't use democracy properly?
Maybe lack of values.
Lack of values, lack of visions. I mean, all these symbolical values, because Western world loves to run on numbers. And isn't it this a way to nowhere? Maybe?
It is one of those fundamental questions. So we can build societies, and it takes a lot of effort, a lot of vision. But what happens when you have built everything that you set out to build, and then you have pretty much perfectly functioning institutions, economies, social systems, and so forth? Then what do you do after that? And I think that's why people turn to things that are just very different, because they need something other than being part of this process of building wealth. They're looking for something different, and for better or worse, religion is just not as strong in Western societies as it used to be. So if you don't have religion to turn to, what do you turn to? Well, you can turn to crazy conspiracy theories. You can marathon on the opposite end. Marathon is a huge thing, and not because everybody has discovered they like to run, but because it's a sort of community. Or on the conspiracy side of that wide range of alternative ways of setting your life up. You have QAnon. Remember, QAnon took off from nothing, and I think it was because it gave people some sort of explanation about how society worked and their role in it. So we had that, and we had the anti-vaxxer movement, and we'll no doubt have many more of these movements. And then, as I said, all the way over to marathon, which is definitely not a conspiracy theory. It's just a way of doing something, aiming for something, working towards something, having community. Yoga, the same thing. And so these things keep popping up. And what will be the next thing, I wonder?
So there is this joke about the Roman Empire, that every man thinks about the Roman Empire and decline of Roman Empire at least once a day. So, do you see any similarities?
Should we start? Do you think it's inevitable that we'll start thinking about the decline of the Western world at least once a day? There probably are similarities, but let's not make it a self-fulfilling prophecy by thinking too much about it. Let's help keep our Western world, which is really it is such an incredible privilege to live in the Western world, in incredible, I shouldn't say incredible twice, in enormous material comfort, in freedom, prosperity, peace, all of that. So let's not talk too much about the inevitable decline of the Western world, but I do agree that every construct, nation construct, or indeed perhaps a construct of many nations together, will reach a plateau when everything that we set out to build has been built, and then when we can't think of what to do next, and that's, I think, when the decay starts happening.
It will be AI, the next thing.
Yes, yes. An adversary as powerful as, or even more powerful than Russia and China.
When you compare state of democracy in Europe, or in the European states, and in the United States, who is doing better or worse?
It is the case that societal trends usually start in the United States and then come to us in Europe in a diluted form, and which is a long way of answering your question. I think America is doing worse, and the reason it's doing worse is that the societal fragmentation and hostility between people has reached a really frightening level. I first moved to the US in the mid-90s, and I'm very much European, but I enjoyed living there because people were friendly. I mean, we all know that Americans are friendly, and what I particularly liked was that they sort of got along among themselves with people who were like them and were not like them or didn't share their political opinions. In fact, people didn't talk very much about their political opinions. But then, I think what we have seen since then is the result of what Robert Putnam called Bowling Alone, and that was a book that he published in 1999, documenting the decline in civic engagement in America. And back in 1999, it was interesting. Oh, so people aren't as engaged in bowling clubs, in choirs, in churches, in various charitable undertakings as they used to be. That was interesting. Well, now we are seeing the result of that. If they don't interact with people from across society as much as they used to. So you and I, if we were Americans back in the 50s, we would have bowled together, even though you may have had completely different political opinions, you may have been in a completely different profession, but we would have bowled together. And as a result, we would have interacted and had that basis on which to coexist. But if you don't have that basis, first of all, you don't interact, and second of all, because you don't spend as much time in it being civically engaged, you have a lot more time to spend reading about Kate Middleton or any other issue of the day, and these issues are increasingly political. So you become very political as a person, and it's all about national issues. It's not so much about local issues, because local newspapers have died in alarming numbers, and that's what I worry about. If the only basis or the most important basis on which people interact with one another is politics, then you will get social fragmentation, then you will get hostility, and then you will get a dysfunctioning political system, which is what I think is happening in America, and I hope we don't get that far here in Europe.
You talk in your book, or the essential idea of your book is that the world now turned towards deglobalization. Do you think it's a long-term trend, or is it just a swing of the pendulum for several reasons? One of them being that the current setup of how we run the world globally, and I'm talking about United Nations, the Security Council that is completely blocked, has expired. That we need a major change in the global affairs. We have to restructure the United Nations, the Security Council, etc. Because as a consequence, what you can see, for instance, is that countries that have not very much in common, such as Brazil, India, South Africa, are getting together in one organization called BRIC, because simply they have no other option. But this way is quite illogical for them, politically, economically, culturally, etc., you name it. So can we afford to go de-global? Can we really afford it? Because I mean, most of the problems we've been facing are global. I mean, it's CO2, it's climate change, it's fighting poverty, it's dealing with epidemic diseases, etc., etc.
So there are two things. The first is that globalization was built on the idea that it's all about economics. So if we trade more with one another, then first of all, it's so efficient, and that's why we have this prosperity, especially in the developed world, but also in some other countries, because it is incredibly efficient to build an economy this way, where you don't have to manufacture in lots of different places and essentially replicating the effort in lots of different places. You can have incredible efficiency by manufacturing primarily in one place, and that could be China or indeed another country, and you have global shipping that transports the things around back and forth between various countries and then on to where they need to go. It's so efficient. But what we've discovered is that it's not all about economics. Countries are not just economical are not just economic creatures, just as people are not just economic creatures. And I think what we've discovered is that some countries their top priority is not to increase trade. Their top priority may be something else altogether. For Russia, the top priority was clearly to get parts of Ukraine. So Putin was willing to sacrifice Russia's part in the globalized economy in order for him to get parts of Ukraine, or indeed all of Ukraine. And they may seem totally illogical to us, but for him, that's what he wanted to do. Similarly, for Xi Jinping, his priority is, as we have now found out, is not to increase prosperity in China at all costs. It's to remain in power. So he's willing to crack down on the private sector in China. Western companies, but also Chinese companies, which is why Jack Ma, the most famous Chinese entrepreneur there is, has essentially got into trouble with the authorities through no fault of his own. His fault was he had become too powerful. So it's not just about economics, and that's what we have seen with citizens all over the West as well, who have benefited so massively from globalization. They are now voicing their disaffection with globalization and the global elite, the faraway elite. And you can say, well, that is so ungrateful. These faraway elites have created this incredible prosperity where that means that any teenager today can have a smartphone. That is extraordinary, but people are not just economic creatures, and I think that is the bottom line. And then, so that's one side, or one aspect. The second aspect is that nation states can't get along forever. The EU is an anomaly because we have many decades now of EU countries getting together, getting along, but that is the huge exception. We thought we could get along with China, with Russia, and so forth, and it turns out that yes, we can get along for a while, and then both sides realize that, it's not really working very well. They are not doing what they said they were going to do. They are not playing by the rules. And I'm sure China and Russia would have a massive, I know they have a massive catalog of complaints against us. So, we are arrogant, we're trying to intervene in their countries and so forth. So countries won't get along forever. And then on top of that, you have the decline of the institutions the world built up after the end of World War II. And it also has to do with the fact that really it was Western countries that were the primary driver behind that. And other countries are resenting it, which is why we're seeing India demanding a permanent seat in the UN Security Council. So the point is, I think we'll have the pendulum will swing towards less global cooperation, unfortunately at a very inopportune moment. But that's the way it's swinging, and so we'll have less cooperation. We'll have within trade, we'll have more regional focus, and we have to get as many countries as we can to be part of the Western grouping. But then I think we'll have a new era of globalization that may be a bit more pragmatic than this round, which was really had a lot of idealism in it. And I think actually the next round will be quite good. And it will include climate change as one of its pillars that we have to work on together.
You remind me, when I was living in the States almost 20 years ago in Philly, I always purchased a weekend edition of New York Times with the famous column by Tom Friedman, the author of the famous, Lexus and the olive tree.
Yeah.
Thank you for being late. And now I would be really, have you managed to talk to him recently? Because, I mean, all his major work dedicated to